Developing nations are expected to press for more financial support at COP26 to compensate the destruction caused by global warming. Many are struggling with the fallout despite contributing only a fraction to the world's emissions. Bangladesh is one such country. The low-lying nation has been hard hit, with the livelihoods of millions destroyed. Climate change has resulted in more cyclones and floods, bringing salt water further inland. Crops and homes have been washed away.
আমার মনে যেটা বলে পানিতেই সব মানে 6 মাস 7 মাস মনে করো বৃষ্টির পানি ধরে রান্না খাওয়া সব এই পানি দিয়ে চলে আর বাকি যে 4-5 মাস এই 4-5 মাস ওই পুকুরের পানি মানে সেলিম এই পুকুরের পানি খালি তো ওতে এমনিও সহ্য করতে পারে না কি ওই পেট খারাপ হয় মনে করো ডায়রিয়া হয় আমাশা হয় মানে সবসময় অসুস্থ বোধ করে
খুব ভালো ছিল অবদা ভেঙে ঘর বাড়ি সব গেছে ভেঙে এখন অবদার ধারা আমাদের এখানে ঘর আবার বাঁধতে হইতেছে বাড়ি থেকে মাটি
For a closer look at the issue of climate finance, we're joined now by Nick Mabey. He's Chief Executive of E3G. Mr. Mabey, a lot has been said about climate finance. That's funding that's meant to address climate change for countries. But what exactly do the funds go towards?
Well, it goes to a variety of purposes. Around 3/4 of the money currently coming from rich countries to poor countries goes on stopping climate change, so supporting renewable energy projects, energy efficiency, or restoring forests. And around 25% of the money goes to help countries adapt to climate damage, so building flood defences, drought-resistant crops, areas like that. What currently doesn't flow at all is any money to compensate countries for damages they've suffered from climate change.
And why aren't developed countries meeting their funding commitments, especially towards poorer nations?
It's been developed countries promised $1 billion a year from 2020 10 years ago. They failed to hit the 2020 deadline. They were at around $75 billion. We have seen a rush of commitments over the last few months. So it looks like they'll meet that target in 2023 or 2022, but then after that will exceed it. So hopefully they will, over the next 5 years, commit to fulfill their full obligation of around $600 billion to developing countries. So I think we've made a lot of progress on that actually in the last months running up to this conference. And I think developing countries more confident that these promises might be kept, even if they're too late, and there's a frustration that not enough of that money is going to help countries. So the big demand here is that half of the money which they're sending should go to adaptation and not so much go to mitigation. And that's going to be one of the big discussions during this conference.
Right, they certainly do need a lot of money for this, Mr. Mabey, but how far can public-private partnerships go towards the cause?
I think that's right. Obviously, this $100 billion sounds a lot of money, but it's a very small amount when we look at the size of the task. To actually shift the global economy to net zero, we need 100 trillion over the next 30 years, not 100 billion. And that's where public-private partnerships come in. Big announcements yesterday by the Americans, the European Union, the UK, that they were going to put their big infrastructure initiatives where they leverage private money with some public risk support into climate change. That was a leaders level announcement, building on some announcements of G7. So that raised a lot of interest. There was a big package just given to South Africa to help them get off coal, 8.5 billion in loans and grants. So we're starting to see a movement on these big public-private partnerships. To be honest, they've underperformed in the past. And that's one of the areas, again, we're going to need to see more movement on this week if countries are going to believe that money is going to be forthcoming to help.
Well, climate finance aside, what are the other key issues that need to be addressed in the overall fight?
Well, I think around climate finance, there are two main things that need to be looked at. Firstly, countries have got to commit to come back with higher targets, because there's not enough ambition on the table at the moment. I think that's proceeding well, but a big push from leaders. We'll see what happens, see if countries, including China, will agree to come back and put more ambition on the table in the next couple of years. But perhaps the biggest issue after that is the issue you started with, which was what's called loss and damage, or how do you help countries who have suffered a lot of climate damage recover That's always been a thorny issue. The Americans always blocked it at the conference, so Biden acknowledged yesterday in his final press conference that something needed to be done. The IMF is starting to look at serious $100 billion to help countries who have been hit really badly by climate change. So loss and damage, compensating countries who have been hit by climate change, that's probably the last big issue the conference is going to succeed or fail on this week.
Well, it's only been a couple of days. We've already heard some pledges. We're expecting to hear lots more commitments made in Glasgow over the next couple of weeks. But these pledges and commitments, they're only going to be fulfilled decades from now, Mr. Mabey. So are we doing too little too late?
Doing too little too late. But the point of Glasgow is quicker. Actually, most of the commitments we're seeing here aren't so much the 2050 commitments as they are for long-term planning. They're actually things in the next decade. So the methane commitment is a cut by 2030. The forest commitment yesterday was stop deforestation by 2030. We expect to see a lot more countries follow the examples of Pakistan and Bangladesh and say they're not going to build coal power stations anymore immediately. And developed countries say they're not going to fund fossil fuels. So you're right, all of the issues in the next 10 years that really matter, and that's what we're. So watch for no new coal announcements, watch for announcements about shifting money towards clean and fossil fuels. Those are the things that will actually give people confidence that we're starting to scale this anger. Big miles go that will really put the issue of climate justice and higher ambition Republican and what goes inside the expectations of those outside the conference, both on the streets and the publics around the world.
We do apologise for some of those audio issues with our connection there with Nick Mabey, but we do thank him for his views. Nick Mabey there from E3G. He's at the Glasgow summit.